Apple's new standard MacBook has been out for just about a week now, and we've been really enjoying it here in the office with all of our testing. But if you're looking to buy one of these new M2 MacBook Airs, there are a few problems you need to be aware of before you buy. Now, we're not trying to hate on this MacBook at all because it truly is a great laptop and the design is amazing. We're just pointing out the downsides so you're aware of them, and we actually have some recommendations on how to avoid some of these problems as well. Now, before we get into the top 10 problems after 1 week, I've got to give a shout out to the sponsor of this video, Grid Studio, who take what would have been e-waste, like over 10,000 discarded cell phones, and turn it into art, like this framed disassembled iPhone 4S, which is the perfect gift for Apple lovers. So check out all of their awesome art pieces using the link below. Now, getting into the first problem about the M2 MacBook Air, the speakers. Now, Apple hyped up the speakers like crazy, saying that it has a new 4-speaker system, which sounds like it should be so much better than the previous 2-speaker system. But in reality, the speakers aren't actually that much better. First of all, there's no more speaker grills like we used to have. The sound simply bounces off of the display and towards the user through some of the vents inside of the actual hinge. And unfortunately, that leads to a smaller soundstage compared to what we had before, where it sounds like the volume is wrapping around you. You no longer get that with the new M2 MacBook Air, and on top of that, the high frequencies are cut down a little bit and muted, and we did expect a big improvement in the bass because of the 2 extra woofers that are inside of the M2 Air, but not really. It's just barely more bass compared to the M1 Air. So with that said, do not make your decision based on the speaker upgrade alone, and here's a clip so you can hear it for yourself. Oh wait, I almost forgot to mention our huge giveaway of one of our 4 M2 MacBook Air models that we ordered. And to join, all you have to do is subscribe to this channel and comment 1 time on each one of our launch week MacBook Air videos, including this one, which will give you more entries to win before we announce the winner at random right here on YouTube on July 25th. And even better, we'll ship it to you no matter where you are in the world for free, including the shipping charges and import taxes. Now, getting into the second problem, we of course have the thermal throttling issues. And it's not only when doing extreme workloads, it's when doing fairly common stuff as well, like exporting 50 photos in Lightroom. And what we're seeing is that the M2 MacBook Air is heating up much faster than the M1 model, and that's because the new Air doesn't even have a proper heatsink according to iFixit with their new teardown. It simply uses this thin metal shielding, which doesn't really do much at all for cooling. And that's really disappointing because the previous M1 MacBook Air came with an actual heatsink, but this new model that uses more power with the M2 chip doesn't. And Apple could have actually used this leftover empty space on the side of the logic board, as you can see in this area from our teardown, to put in an actual heatsink and then connect that to the M2 chip using some sort of heat pipe if they moved some of the things around on the logic board, but they didn't. They have no proper heatsink. But thankfully, there is a solution, and that is our thermal pad mod, which we did for only 15 bucks. So all you gotta do is buy one of these sheets, cut it up, and place it over the logic board like we showed you guys in our thermal throttling fix video. And just doing this alone made the M2 MacBook Air finish the photo export faster than the M2 MacBook Pro, which is fan-powered. It is a massive difference. And the only drawback is that the bottom of the MacBook Air is going to be getting hot during extended workloads, but the benefit is that you get 15 minutes of full performance without reaching massive throttling instead of just 5 minutes without the thermal pads. And you get the new M2 MacBook Air redesign without having to go for that old M2 MacBook Pro design just to get that fan to avoid this easy throttling. And now getting into problem number 3, this also has to do a little bit with thermal throttling because the M2 MacBook Air at the base price comes with an 8-core GPU, but if you really want to, you could upgrade to the 10-core version for $100 more, and it seems like you should be getting a lot more GPU performance. However, according to a video from Greg's Gadgets, there was actually some cases where the 10-core GPU model performed worse than the 8-core, which makes no sense at all. But what ends up happening is that the 10-core heats up faster and it thermal throttles so much that it actually downclocks the GPU, leading to slightly worse performance than the 8-core model, which should not happen, especially if you're paying $100 more. And it shows that this thermal system is pretty bad, but luckily you can use that thermal pad mod to get a little bit longer full performance without throttling. And now getting into problem number 4, we have this new midnight finish, which I absolutely love. It almost looks like a matte black when it's dark, and when it's bright, it looks like a dark navy blue, and I just love this color. However, it does have some issues because underneath this finish, we have a regular silver metal color. So what ends up happening is if you scratch it, it's gonna be incredibly noticeable. And not only that, we noticed some little silver lines or scratches near the Thunderbolt port area after only using it a couple of times. So I can imagine after a year or two, this thing could look all scratched up, especially near the port area. And not only that, but this thing is a fingerprint magnet like crazy. You just use it a couple times, fingerprints everywhere. You're gonna have to clean it all the time. So that could be annoying and that could be a problem to some of you guys. So definitely choose a different color if you hate fingerprints and those scratches. Moving on to problem number 5, another issue with the M2 MacBook Air is that once again, it still only supports one external monitor. Now that is very disappointing because all of us were expecting Apple to upgrade this and allow up to 2 monitors, but no, still only one. So there are a lot of disappointed people out there, specifically people who like to use multiple monitor setups. And not only that, but we still have the same Bluetooth 5.0 and Wi-Fi 6 specs, which is disappointing. There's so many other laptops and machines and products out there that have moved up to Bluetooth 5.2, and I personally was expecting us to get the new specs, but no, it's all the same. Now for problem number 6, we have the microphones, which we thought would be getting better, especially with this full redesign on this M2 MacBook Air, but no, we compared them to the M1 MacBook Air, and it actually seems like the M1 previous model sounds better in terms of the microphone quality, which we did not expect. And this kind of sounds even more quiet and a little bit muted, so that's disappointing in terms of the microphones. Now that's definitely not gonna be a make it or break it decision for you guys, but keep that in mind if you do a lot of Zoom calls or whatever else. Now for problem number 7, we have the new keyboard, and unfortunately this one has a little bit less travel than the previous M1 model. It seems like because this thing got thinner, they did have to reduce the key travel, and some people might care a lot, maybe not, but that is one thing that is good to know. And on top of that, the trackpad also seems different as well. It doesn't seem as clicky as it was before. I don't know if that's because it got thinner or they changed something, but I definitely prefer the clickiness and feel of the trackpad and keyboard on the previous M1 model. Now, of course, this is not going to be a huge deal, but once again, it's something to keep in mind. And now getting to some of the really big problems, we have problem number 8, which is the SSD speeds on the base 256 gig model. Just like the M2 MacBook Pro, we have the same issue where we only have a single NAND chip instead of using up both of those spots like Apple did in the past with the M1 MacBook Air and Pro. And this is important because both of those spots have channels going to the SSD controller. And when you take out one of those channels by not putting a chip there, it essentially slows down the SSD speeds. And while it seems like performance is not going to get impacted that much, we did a real-world file transfer, and the 512 gig SSD model finished over 6 times faster than the 256, and that is just so disappointing. Not only that, but those SSD channels matter a lot for virtual swap memory performance. So when you use up all of your RAM, it starts to rely on the SSD to act as virtual RAM. And because the speed is slower, it ends up slowing down the entire machine when you're doing some multitasking, and not even extreme multitasking, just like 5 Safari tabs while doing a productivity task can slow down the performance drastically across a bunch of different tests. So I believe Apple really messed up with this SSD situation, and our recommendation is to avoid the base SSD as much as possible. Just go for that 512 gig and up. And then problem number 9 is actually connected to that, because this new M2 MacBook Air starts at $1,200, which is $200 more than the previous M1 MacBook Air, but you have this SSD issue where Apple took away one of the NAND chips, so you're paying $200 more for half of the NAND chips, which definitely sucks as a consumer with this base model. And to properly fix this issue, you've got to upgrade to the 512 gig SSD to revive the actual virtual memory swap performance that you should be getting, or that the M2 chip actually deserves, and that's going to cost you an additional $200. So essentially you have a $400 difference for the same virtual memory swap performance, going from the $1,000 M1 MacBook Air to the $1,400 M2 MacBook Air with the 512 gig SSD. So that's a little bit disappointing, and that's a big difference in cost for the same virtual memory swap performance and for file transfers as well. And not only that, but you're paying $200 extra compared to the M1, and you're no longer getting a proper heatsink. You're just getting that thin shielding, which really doesn't do much at all. So the cost difference is really a problem on this M2 MacBook Air. And now finally, for problem number 10, Apple showed off the new MagSafe 3 feature with fast charging that'll get you from 0% to 50% in just 30 minutes, which sounds amazing, and Apple did a great job marketing it. However, if you go out and you buy the base model, you go to your Apple store, your Best Buy, which usually just stocks the base model, you're not gonna get fast charging support. Yes, if you want fast charging, you have to upgrade to the 67 watt power adapter, which costs an additional $20 to get, or you have to upgrade to a higher end model to get that included, which sucks because the base model only gets the 30 watt adapter, which does not feature fast charging. So definitely keep that in mind if you're excited about that feature. And there you guys go. Those were the top 10 problems with the M2 MacBook Air that you need to be aware of before you make your purchase. Don't forget to click subscribe to enter the giveaway, as well as commenting down below. Be sure to check out one of those 2 videos right there. And if you're interested in one of those Grid Studio frames as a gift, I have links below to that as well. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.